Hello, everybody. This is the Line podcast for the week of May 10th, 2024. Today, we're going to be talking about Conservative Party nomination shenanigans. It involves a really hot chick, so you're going to want to stick around for that. Then we're going to talk about the Liberal Party's very desperate early pivot to abortion politics. Little soon in the game for that one, guys. And lastly, we're going to be talking about the Gaza encampment that sprung up in Calgary and then was rapidly unsprung. That's this week at the Line podcast with Jen Gerson and Matt Gurney.
Just for the record, Jen, you can say the hot chick part. I can't say that, so I'm going to let you explain that. But before we get into the hot chick,
she's a pretty girl.
As Jen described her, I would describe her as valued colleague. We want to remind everybody about the upcoming Edmonton event. It's now less than a month away. It's coming at us fast, which means I'm probably going to have to do some reading so that I'm ready for the Edmonton event. Join us June 6, 2024 in Alberta's capital. I'll be there. Jen will be there. We're going to have a great panel of experts talking about whether or not Canada's ready to face whatever fresh hell gets thrown in our face next. Are we ready, as the poster asks, for the next economic, and then there's some profanity, storm? It's going to be a great conversation. There's going to be food. There's going to be drinks. There's going to be us. There's going to be really smart people who are going to make us look better just by being there. And hopefully you join us in Edmonton about 4 weeks from now on June the 6th. We're going to put the link of where you can find those tickets right in the description there. You have no excuse not to show up. And remember, we sold out Calgary. So you Edmonton people, don't you dare let that Alberta city, other Alberta city, show you guys up. We're counting on Edmonton to show up for us. That's all I got. Now, Jen, you can explain your feelings about my former valued colleague, as I describe her.
All right. Well, firstly, we're going to talk. We've spoken a little bit about Sabrina Maddeaux in the podcast before, namely when she announced that she was going to leave her position at the National Post to join Conservative politics. There was a lot of drama, particularly from the left, around the idea of journalists in particular jumping ship. And leaving the profession, using their profiles in order to seek nominations in politics. And you and I were a little bit, cautiously ambivalent about that particular position, because we said, yeah, in theory, correct, you don't want journalists jumping ship that way. And for that reason, because it kind of undermines the seeming fairness, objectivity is close to what I'm looking for it, of the entire profession when journalists do that. That being said, lots of journalists have done it. And also lots of journalists do it in a way that is, to my mind, a lot dodgier than actually quitting your job and then running to win a nomination battle, which means that you have to get the people of your community on board with you. For example, I have much less problem with that than the people who leave journalism and join parties in a staff role or in a kind of a political power role, or even, frankly, there are lobbyist roles and kind of strategist kind of roles that I think is I think that's a darker pool than actually running up front to gain a nomination. So Sabrina Maddeaux, you'll have a better sense of her career trajectory than I will, because I think she worked at the Post when you were there. I'd gone by the time she started, but she's really a very beautiful woman. I think it must be said. I think she's a former model. She's a very stunning woman. She's written some great columns. Some things I agree with, some things I disagree with, but I thought that she was a really good, interesting voice in the conservative side of the political spectrum here in Canada. I think she'd worked for a couple of years from the Post, but it's not like she'd worked there for 10 years or anything. I think she'd worked there for a year or two. But Matt, you'd know better than I would.
Well, first of all, let me just say all of my colleagues are equally beautiful in my eyes, because we also all carry within us the flame of journalism, and that's the only thing I'm
flame of journalism and the spark of God.
Yeah, that's right. Spark of the divine and the flame of journalism. So you're all equally beautiful to me, colleagues. No, I'll be honest with you. Sabrina and I overlapped at the Post, but not really.
Okay.
When she was new there, I was already relatively senior, and my exposure to her was minimal. I knew her, would have spoken to her. And I think I went through all the disclosures the first time we talked about her. I think I've met her in person twice, and I've spoken to her a few times, including since she left for politics. I have nothing but good, warm, personal feelings towards Sabrina, but I don't really know her.
Okay, fair enough. Well, and I'm willing to say the thing that you refuse to, and that is, I think she's hotter than me. I'm just going to say it. I think she's way hotter than me.
I'm not capable of perceiving things on that level.
I,
No, I mean,
I
look,
am, and I'm willing to say it.
the only comment I'll make about that, as I desperately avoid cancellation, is Sabrina was an attractive, no pun intended, candidate for the Conservatives in that she was a young, attractive, outspoken woman.
Yeah, she's.
And you and I
We
have
would say,
spoken about this
the
before.
delicate way we would put this was that she was a good demographic fit for the for the Conservative Party, right? She's the type of person who you want on your team if you were the Conservative Party, which is sort of
Yeah,
traditionally associated with kind of old white dudes, right? Like you want
me.
you yeah, exactly. You want more young women, attractive women, or I mean, I said I think looks are an asset in a woman. There you go. I'm willing to say it. I think looks are an asset in a men too, but
Outrageous.
it's just what it is. And also, as a Conservative Party wants to reach out and to be more, see more people from different communities represented. That includes, ethnic communities and minority communities, religious communities as well. You want to make sure that, your party doesn't look or appear to be, or to simply be, looking like it's a party that's run for one single narrow demographic. I mean, that's just what it is in a multiracial, multicultural society like ours. That's great. So anyway, I thought she was a pretty, again, no pun intended, hot and potentially great candidate for the Conservatives to have grabbed. And you and I kind of both wished her well. I don't think that she should be coming back to journalism after this, but I think there was a clear career trajectory for her in that space. So good for her, right? However, things did not appear to be going particularly well. Matt, do you remember which riding she was running in?
I don't remember the exact name of it because they've redistricted them a bunch of times. But Sabrina and I, as I mentioned in the first time we talked about it, we actually both grew up in Richmond Hill, Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
And I spoke to her later about that after she had announced her campaign. I'd sent her just kind of a generic, hey, all the best note. And I'd said to her, where in Richmond Hill did you grow up? And it turns
Mm-hmm.
out she had grown up, because again, I'm older than her.
Mm-hmm.
Richmond Hill, like so much of the GTA, has sort of grown out and expanded over the last generation. So I grew up in the southern part of Richmond Hill, which is the older, more established part. And then she had grown up in the neighborhoods that had sort of been being built while I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So she was running, and again, I'm probably going to mangle the name of the riding, but she was running in the part of the riding that was the Oak Ridges Aurora part, so the northern part.
Mm-hmm.
And it's worth mentioning, Jen, we'll get more into this later, but another friend of the line, an occasional contributor for us and a personal friend of mine, Kaveh Shahrooz, he was running in Richmond Hill, the riding called Richmond Hill, which is where I did grow up, that part of Richmond Hill, and he also dropped out of the nomination race.
Yeah,
So
I think it's pretty.
We'll get into that, but
we'll get into that. I think it's pretty common for people who are longtime observers of politics or politics from the outside to suddenly get thrust into the reality of politics, especially at a nomination race level, and realize, oh gosh, there's a lot here I didn't understand about how this process actually works. So you can be quite naive about it. And I think that also sometimes people can be exposed to the grubbiness of that system as well. I mean, parties are private clubs. Parties are private clubs, and they kind of get to operate under their own rules. The nomination processes can sometimes be open and fair, and sometimes the nomination processes are just like, no, we have an appointed candidate we want for this riding, and screw your internal process. So there's always tension there. There's always issues there. But I would say this is that Sabrina, I think that if Sabrina were a good fit for the party and the club liked her and she was a good connect, like people felt that she would be a good MP, there would be ways to make that work for her. So I don't see why the party would be in any way incentivized to sabotage her in any way. She was exactly the kind of MP that the Conservative Party ought to be looking for. So the incentive to sabotage her or undermine her from the party side is pretty low as far as I can tell. But I bring this up because this week, Sabrina comes out with this long tweet thread and video basically saying, I think outrightly accusing the Conservative Party of, I guess, I want to be careful here, sabotaging her using, and I think she actually accused the party of using sort of criminal malfeasance in order to scutter her nomination battle. Let's double check that because I don't want to be accused of putting words in her mouth there.
In the written dispatch, what we'll do is we'll quote directly and we'll include a link.
We'll quote directly and we'll
purposes, We will confirm all of this verbatim, but certainly Sabrina was accusing the party of having it out for her, and what
Having it up for her.
we'll let others speak to in what precise way. But my understanding is it all revolved around the party membership list.
Well, okay, so I think her accusations were twofold. One was the idea that she didn't have access to the party membership list at the same time that her opponents did. That her opponents came into this race with lists that she didn't have. And secondly, that I think there was some kind of she was accusing someone of sending like anonymous mean emails about her to sort of undermine her reputation and to kill her chances in the party. So let's take both of those allegations in turn. So firstly, what I was saying before, it's very common for people who observe politics to suddenly be in politics and not realize that they didn't actually understand how a lot of these systems work. When she was complaining about not having access to the lists, that's all that I could think of. Because bluntly, everybody who organizes in politics has informal lists. This is just, they all have lists. I don't know what to tell you. Like, they may not have the official party list, but if they don't have the official party list, they'll have some combination of lists that they used in previous nomination battles, personally acquired lists. Like, all organizers who know what they're doing have private lists. That's just what they have. They do.
You and I, with half an hour of charm, could probably access the party list for any riding in this country.
Now, should they all have lists? No. I guess they should all be coming into every nomination battle completely blank, and every organizer technically should be deleting all of their data from campaign to campaign. But everyone knows that nobody does. And this is why who you hire to help you manage a campaign matters, because you're going to want to hire people who have collected data and lists. This is just a sort of a reality of sausage making of politics that is unavoidable, because you can't make there are hundreds of campaign organizers across the country, if not thousands. I guess now I'm doing math. There are thousands of campaign organizers across the country, all of whom are sitting on private stockpiles of lists. All of
this
them.
Reminds
you can't
me of,
make them get rid of it.
I once got forwarded 11 MP3s, all of a meeting that began with the explicit reminder that it was not to be recorded.
This is what it is. So either Sabrina's organizer didn't have the collection of lists that a typical organizer would have, and or Sabrina was too naive to realize that that was a thing that was pretty normal, particularly considering she was going against a candidate who had tried for this nomination previously and certainly had built lists from those previous tries. And the only way, if she didn't have those lists, the only way that she was going to be able to make up the balance of that was through selling memberships. So selling memberships is often how people win in party nominations and also in leadership races, right? This is hard work. This is banging on every door. This is just absolute grindstone stuff, right? You have to go to every door in your riding and say, have you signed up for a blah, 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 blah? Have you signed up for a membership? Have you signed up for a membership? Vote for me, vote for me, vote for me. It's absolutely hard, tedious, awful work. And it's the way that somebody coming into politics for the first time would start to build a list and also would start to build support. After Sabrina put out her "woe is me, the party's out to get me" tweet/video, it was sort of leaked around that in fact she had only sold something like 50 to 58 memberships.
Honestly, it wasn't even leaked. I looked at I looked at my kind of reliable conservative proxy Twitter accounts, people I know who are reliable conveyors of the official word.
Yes.
Sabrina, God bless her, these people took her out into the public square and shot her in full view of the entire village. So, like, they were murdering her reputation out there.
So I believe on CBC she was asked, well, we heard that you sold only 50 memberships. Just so that we're clear, if you only sell 50 memberships in a nomination race, you're roadkill. Like, that's not even, you're so far beyond the skill set of being helped. And she's like, well, no, I didn't sell 50 memberships. I sold 200. So firstly, I don't know if she's lying or not, or maybe she means that there are still 150 memberships that haven't been processed by the party. Any of these things is possible. But just so that we're clear, if she is lying about that, that's also easy to disprove, and firstly, and secondly, is really, really dumb, because the number of memberships that you need to sell, even in a basic competitive riding, is sort of on the order of thousands, not hundreds. Thanks for coming out, kid. Like, like I don't, if she had said I sold 2,000 memberships, then then she's in the running. 200 basically tells you that there was no appetite for her in that particular riding, and she lacked the political savvy to understand how far off the mark she really was. So there's the list stuff. Then you get into the allegations that people were anonymously sending mean emails about her that quoted her previous columns, and they were all out to get her. And the response to that is, honey, that's politics. That's campaigning. If you run for a nomination battle, your opponents and people who don't like you are going to send mean emails trying to explain to fellow members why they should vote for this guy and not that guy. That's normal. That's normal campaigning. I haven't seen the email that she claims trashes her and her reputation. I can't verify whether or not it was over the line. She seems to think it is. But bluntly, what do you think? Like, if that was over the line for you, what do you think running in an actual election is going to be? Like this is the game, I'm afraid, and you need to be able to manage that. You need to be able to handle it. And then I guess the third part that ties this all into a bow for me was the decision that she did to go and basically accuse the party of wrongdoing because she was going to lose. If you're going to lose a nomination battle, there's no shame in that. Like, lots of people try to run in a nomination battle or try to run into politics, and they fail, or they realize, hey, there was more to this that I realized. I gave it my honest go. I didn't make it. Thanks for coming out. It's been a great experience. And if she had done that with a degree of sort of discretion and class, there would have been a future for her in the party in some other fashion or some other role. Maybe it wouldn't have been an MP. Maybe it would have been something else. But sort of burning all of your bridges in a tweet storm, I'm not sure what she thinks she's going to get out of that. And also, if you're going to accuse the party of wrongdoing, you're going to need something better than the other guy had lists I didn't have and people sent mean emails about me. That's not even outside the realm of ordinary nomination battle shenanigans. That's what a nomination battle is. I don't know what to tell you here. So I don't know. Like, I feel bad for her, I guess. But my impression is, oh, honey, you didn't understand what you were getting into. That's very sad for you. But I don't know. Am I wrong, Matt?
No.
Okay.
No. The only thing I'm going to say, and this is, I think I generally agree, but I'm going to devil's advocate you just a little bit.
Devil's advocate.
Just to say, you have sketched together an explanation for what happened to Sabrina based on a composite of other campaigns you're familiar with.
Sure.
Not specific information about what Sabrina had. So
fair.
That's kind of my only sense on this. And I want to mention the Kaveh thing as well. I'm not friends with Sabrina, but I like her, and I am friends with Kaveh, and I like him. Kaveh had made, in much the same way that Sabrina had made, excuse me. Sorry, I'm just, as you know, I'm getting over a bit of a health bump this week. Spring colds, they're the best. I like both these people, and I don't want to be unkind to them, but I think Sabrina has made specific allegations of misconduct against the party. And Kaveh had made a different allegation, which was that Kaveh has always been an outspoken critic of the Iranian regime. And he had said that Richmond Hill, my old hometown, has a large Persian population now. And he had said that there were people there with ties to the regime who were harassing him, harassing his family, harassing campaign supporters, and that the Conservative Party was not going to bat for him. And I want to take Sabrina's allegations of misconduct from the party. I don't want to take it at face value, but I want to take it seriously. Open mind.
Sure.
And I want to take Kaveh allegations seriously and have an open mind to them as well. But I have wondered in both cases, just wondered, if it is along the lines of what you had said, which is that people who had built large public profiles, specifically within communities, or like Kaveh within Richmond Hill with the Iranian community, and Sabrina as a National Post columnist with the conservative audience generally. They had both done good community building there. And then you make the jump into politics, and you find that it's rougher than you expected, and you hadn't really known what you were getting into, and you recoil from it, and you want to get out, and you want to get out on your own terms. So all of us position everything. Like, I've always said this, we're all the main character in our own life story, right? So everybody wants to see it through the maximally favorable terms. But I think one of the things, just as a broader comment on the political context, right now, the Conservatives have priced in victory. And people who are broadly in the Conservative orbit are pricing in Conservative victory. The Conservatives expect to win. The Liberals expect the Conservatives to win. And I think the country at large expects the Conservatives to win. I haven't seen a poll specifically asking a predictive question as opposed to a preference question. I think people who are politically engaged understand what the polls are showing us.
Yes.
And what I think this means is that right now there are people who are looking at Conservative nominations not through the lens of grubby, nasty, elbows up political fight. They're looking at it as 4 years in Ottawa, making 160 grand, maybe scoring a cabinet post.
Yeah.
And they're probably not wrong, because there's a pretty good chance whoever ends up winning the nominations for the Conservatives in both of those ridings is going to Ottawa.
Yep.
But there's 18 months to go where you're not drawing a regular paycheck unless you have some other means of employment that you can. Sabrina left her National Post job to go run this. I think Kaveh probably is okay because he has personal interests, but it's a long time to be doing the grubby trench work before you get to that reasonable chance at getting that ticket to Ottawa. And I think there are people out there right now who had, I'm sure it was all for the noble reasons. I'm going to give both of them and everyone else all the credit of good intentions. They wanted to go to Ottawa and make things better.
Well, and I think, Leslie, like, running for politics sucks. So I have a lot of that. I get a lot of empathy. I have a lot of empathy for people who put their names out there and take the risk. It's a public service and they're doing a duty, and it sucks and it's hard work. And so right off the bat, like, I realize that you and I like to give politicians shit because it's kind of our job, right? But please understand that it's coming from a place, it's part of our role, but please understand that it's coming from a place of deep respect for the fact that these are people all of them are doing stuff that we won't because we don't want to, because it sucks. It sucks. It's a hard job, right? So if you think that you're going into politics and this is going to be an easy ride and power is an easy thing, it's not. It really isn't for anybody. And the interesting thing about politics is the less competitive the general election becomes. I can tell you this from being
more intense those nomination battles are, and the real politics happens at the nomination battle level. I can tell you that as someone who's worked in Alberta politics or observed Alberta politics for a really long time. The election's not the election. What's happening in politics is happening at the nomination battle. That's where you have to watch the nasty fight is for the opportunity to get that ticket. And it's almost a sure thing. And right now, look, I have an open mind to things happening, but right now running for a Conservative in most part of the country is pretty much a meal ticket.
Yeah. So as I said, I don't know what the Kaveh situation is, so I don't want to speak to it. But all I can say is, on paper, Sabrina's a great candidate. And on paper, I don't see any particular reason why the Conservative Party would be out to get her. In fact, I think that the Conservative Party would be absolutely thrilled to have a candidate with Sabrina's credentials on their team. So if something went wrong there, I'm more inclined to think that the fault is probably with the candidate than with the party. Either the candidate didn't have the particular skill set needed to generate the data that was necessary or generate the support that was necessary, and just didn't have quite the grit or resilience, or maybe just didn't have the understanding of quite how the system worked. I think there were probably also a couple little errors I could get into without getting into detail. I mean, I don't think they're necessary. But also there's nothing shameful in saying, you know what, I gave it a shot, and the nomination battle, I wasn't going to win. And I learned a lot, and it was a great experience, and I'm happy to work with whatever in the party in the future and see if there's a future opportunity for me. Most people, I think, who fight in nomination battles lose 1 or 2 times before they win. I think that's actually very, very normal. So I think that if you're going into that with realistic expectations and you understand that this is a process, people can do very well. But I think that if you're going into this with very unrealistic expectations, like if you're going into this with this vision that I'm this big shot whomever because I was a National Post columnist or I was a this or that, and you think that you're going to get around the realities of going door to door to 10,000 doors trying to sell memberships, you're pretty rapidly going to wash out of this profession, of this particular thing. Or if you think that you aren't going to have to deal with nasty anonymous emails or nasty anonymous lit drops against you, again, that's not you're not going into this with a realistic set of expectations. So I kind of wonder in Sabrina's case if her expectations were a problem, if she kind of thought that I'm such
good saying. We should coin that.
Yeah. Like, I'm kind of wondering if she kind of went in thinking, well, clearly I'm a great candidate.
Maddeaux.
I'm Sabrina Maddeaux. Like, who wouldn't want me? And she was kind of expecting a coronation and maybe didn't get that. I don't know.
I don't know either. We should probably just ask her.
We should probably just ask her. Yeah.
But what I would say,
I said, like, what's really indicative to me is that she's going on CBC and like saying, "Well, I didn't sell 50 memberships. I sold 200," and I'm sitting here going, "That's you didn't understand."
I don't know what the actual baseline level of conservative membership in Oak Ridge's Aurora is.
Let me just look it up real quick. You keep talking. I'm going to go look up the last. I'm going to go see if I can find it.
Hit that wiki. The point I was going to make, and I don't think, Jen, I don't think I disagree with you in the main, but I do think. Let me throw a sports comparison at you here. One of the things that some of the pro leagues have had to get good at is taking kids who may come from a completely underprivileged background, no family support, grew up in dirt poverty, but good Lord, can they throw a football? Or can they ever move the puck? Some of the leagues have had to kind of realize they got to get these kids after the draft at 18 and like assign like a mentor to them. Someone who'll tell them, well, when you get that first $7 million endorsement, like don't go blow it all on Coke and Lamborghinis. I think political parties, particularly with someone who has no political experience, if it is, I want to say a high-profile candidate, but if it's a particularly desirable candidate, and I will agree that Sabrina brought assets to the party, particularly in the GTA, that the party would have wanted. If Sabrina did go in and her expectations were a problem, we can assign a lot of the responsibility of that to Sabrina. And we can rightly say she didn't know what she was getting into. This is all hypothetical. Sabrina, if you're listening, we don't know. We're just speaking hypothetically. But I also think at a certain point, Sabrina and Kaveh both having roughly comparable exits. Maybe 2 is a coincidence. But I start to wonder if whoever's recruiting GTA candidates is not doing a proper job.
Firstly, these aren't comparable exits. What Kaveh is describing, Kaveh is not saying that the party corrupted was a corrupt process and they went out to screw him over. Kaveh had some, publicly at least, as I said, the other problem I would point out is there's every single election, there are multiple stories of dodgy nominations.
Sure.
And that's really, really normal. And not in all parties, by the way. In every single story, you have local communities or local constituency association complaining because leader X is parachuting favorite candidate into overriding local, blah, 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 blah. And this happens multiple times across all parties. That's really normal. And I think it goes back to the conversation I had before, and that is ultimately political parties are not open. They're clubs. They're private clubs. You kind of have to get into the club. That's what it is. And there's a couple ways into the club. Yeah. One of them is that the leaders just appoint you and they parachute you in. That's one of the ways into the club because they think you're such a star that they think that they just need to play a seat for you, and they override the local
Payette of politics.
Yeah, exactly. They override the local constituency association and they parachute you in. That's one of the ways into the club. Another one of the ways into the club is that, okay, maybe the leaders have a favorite candidate, in which case you have to work 50 times harder than that candidate in order to outsell them on memberships. That's another way into the club. And if you can do that, then you can get in. But also, like, the leadership has the right, and always, and even the current Liberals, everybody has the right to look at a candidate and say, you know what, your credentials, your background, your oppo file is so messy that if we your liability, so they can nix and cancel this and kick you out of the club that way. So I just don't see, if Sabrina Maddeaux, for example, if her columns, her previous columns were a liability, the Conservative Party wouldn't have greenlit her as a nomination candidate.
Yeah.
There would have been no gain for them in that. And if they were a liability and they saw that she was such a threat, they could have easily nixed her after she won. I mean, there's no here. And I have a hard time seeing what the Conservative Party, why they would have it out for her, because she is
I'm not suggesting they have it out for her. I'm suggesting maybe they aren't doing a good job explaining what the process will be like to people who have no prior experience.
Okay, maybe that's okay. So let's play with that idea, because is the argument here that Sabrina and Kaveh are disadvantaged and deserve some kind of special treatment?
Maybe a talk. If the party wants to recruit interesting people, as you went out of your way to say Sabrina was, I was totally agnostic on the matter, but you went out of the way to extol Sabrina's virtues.
Well, and her looks.
That's what I was referring to. Yes. Maybe, and I'm not saying this is a matter of moral imperative. I'm saying this is a matter of political prudence.
Sure.
Don't have months of people going out there identifying themselves with your party, only for them to spend 8 weeks doing it and go, "This sucks. I quit."
Yeah.
You know what? I don't think this is going to do a lot of significant damage to the Conservatives. But
no, this is
good on them.
No, but I mean, this is also very much insider Ottawa tea at this point. Like, nobody actually cares about nomination battles. I mean, this is not really that relevant.
I think the party would serve its own interests to have fewer of these flameouts, particularly in fairly competitive areas.
Was Sabrina? I mean, we should just ask her. Was Sabrina recruited for the party, or did she want to be in the party?
Given the circumstances of the last time we talked about her, I have studiously not asked that question, because the last time we talked about Sabrina at any length is when I wrote a column, which is actually, this is a little bit to the side. Joyce Napier, CTV, Canada's, as of this week, ambassador to the Vatican. And this is interesting to me because I wrote that column a few months ago when Sabrina had announced she was running. And there was all this hand-wringing among Liberals going, "Oh, it's the post-media to Conservative railroad, right? Oh, it's so grubby." And I just started running down a list of when media figures had jumped into politics.
Yeah.
And so at the time, we had discussed, and I wrote in my column, that it is 100% fair to wonder how long that process of seduction had been. Whether or not the Conservatives approached her and began wooing her to run as a candidate, or whether she looked at Postmedia's latest quarterly statement, said, "The hell with this," and cold called her local Conservative riding office. I don't know.
Okay, but here's the argument. If your position here is that she was recruited into politics, then it doesn't make any sense for the Conservatives to then turn around 30 seconds later and screw her over. That doesn't line up. If she was actively recruited into this position.
I'm only going to be able to defend the things I've actually said.
Yeah. Anyway, fair enough. Anyway, I'm just saying these things don't line up in my head.
No, but I haven't said the things that are in your head. I don't know if she was recruited or not, and I also don't know exactly the circumstances of her departure. I do know that my reliable Conservative proxies, part of me had wondered when she made the announcement that she was leaving, was this maybe a dumb, but maybe it was intended as like a negotiating position? Like maybe she wanted the party to come in and go, "Oh, no, we commit to a clean race, blah, blah, blah." But then I watch my reliable Conservative proxies go, "Well, yeah, she sucked anyway." Like, it was pretty ruthless looking at her reputation be dismantled on Twitter yesterday.
Yeah.
So there was clearly no desire for any kind of reproachment from the party to her. This is purely speculative, Jen. 100% speculation here. I wonder if the party had determined that for whatever reason she was not going to be a good candidate. Maybe they loved her profile. Maybe they loved her. Maybe she charmed the pants off them. But then they began to have concerns and then began nudging things in a different direction.
I mean,
I honestly don't know.
that would be pretty normal in a nomination kind of situation.
Sure.
The only thing that I would point out is all we have to go on are Sabrina's stated allegations, and the allegations that she's putting forward don't prove any kind of party malfeasance or wrongdoing.
You know, the moment we publish this, the leaks to us are going to start, right?
Oh, let's hope so. Like, you know what I mean? Like I said, like I'm not. I'm
you want to spend
happy.
all weekend wading through the emails?
Yeah, exactly. I'm just saying, like, look, my opponents had lists I didn't have, and someone sent a mean email. Doesn't line up to a credible allegation of party wrongdoing.
Yep. No, I agree. I mean, or at least not beyond the realm of what I would expect.
Sure. Right.
It's like, to me, this is, look, in theory, I think we'd all support the ideal of clean, fair races. But if you go into a riding nomination against someone who has run before and you're shocked that they have access to lists you don't, I don't know.
Anyway, like and subscribe the Line.
Like and subscribe. Well, that was fun and edifying.
I'm going to get into so much trouble, aren't I? Sorry. I'm sorry to the sisterhood. I apologize preemptively. I'm a bad person.
No, you're not. Look, the reality of it is, we should have said this before the like and subscribe break, but look, a feature of modern politics is that you need to cast players to play certain roles. And certain people are good for ethnic community outreach. You need a certain number of people who can be your point person for every religious community. You need a certain number of people who have experience in medicine, law enforcement, the armed forces, things like that. You have boxes you got to check. And one of the boxes you got to check, and there's no shame in saying this, is telegenic.
Yeah, 100%.
And it doesn't have to be
it's
any
not
particular form of conventional beauty, but you've got to be able to go on TV on those panels, look good, sound good, kick ass.
Some people have this spark on television, and they're very good. I mean, I would say that I'm probably one of these people who was quite telegenic because I always got invited to panels and I always got invited back to panels, right? I can be sparkly on TV. It's just a skill set that I have. I'm lucky.
I'm a radio guy.
Great. Yeah. Like, there you go. Right. It's just what it is. So there's no, it's not a judgment. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just, we all have different skill sets and we all bring different assets to the conversation.
And that is why I find every colleague of mine equally beautiful. Because we all have something. Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Abortion.
Let's talk abortion. Can't wait. Really thrilled to talk about this.
So we should talk about the notwithstanding stuff that led into the conversation about abortion first, I think. To try and explain what got us here this week. What got us to talking about abortion this week?
How far back do you want to take it?
Well, that's getting a little personal.
Pardon me?
That's getting a little personal, Matt. No, I'm kidding.
You are determined to get in trouble.
An abortion joke. God, I'm the worst. I'm a bad person. I'm sorry. I shall repent. I repent.
Like and subscribe, but only to me, the responsible Line editor. A couple of weeks ago, Pierre Poilievre was addressing cops, talking to like a law enforcement conference, and he had hinted, didn't say explicitly at the time, that he would use constitutional powers to ensure that bail was reformed in this country and that dangerous people were kept off the streets. Mm-hmm. He did not say Section 33 of the Constitution, known as the Notwithstanding Clause, but he hinted that.
Yeah.
And again, like I said a minute ago, before you perved out on me and I had said, how far back do you want to go? Obviously, the broader context of this, something we've often spoken about on the podcast, which is law and order issues, where repeatedly in this country, we have recently had issues where in my hometown, Toronto, just as an example, some guy gets shot, cops make an arrest, guy's already out on bail for a previous shooting. And there has been, I don't know if this has made national news, but here in the GTA, there's been this absolute clusterfuck of a story of grandparents and a baby being killed in a car crash.
Yeah, awfulness.
And the Conservatives had said, so let me just tell this to you, Jen. This is just background stuff, but it's safe to say now, immediately the Toronto media circuit was buzzing that police knew exactly who this dude was, and he had a bunch of priors, and he was out on bail.
Mm-hmm.
Took a couple of days for that to be confirmed, but because this was a fatal incident, the police are removed from the information loop, and the independent, it's called the Special Investigations Unit in Ontario. They're the guys who investigate any police-related fatality. So the information loop officially was slow, but the buzz was fast. Within about a day or two of the incident, I knew that this guy had been out on bail.
Right.
So that's a recent example. And bail for like a bunch of petty crimes, but also a robbery and a carjacking. Those are much higher up. That's Joe Warmington's reporting. But when Joe Warmington reports what the cops are saying, you can take that to the bank.
Yep.
I'll just say that as a guy who knows Joe and knows the Toronto media scene. So the Conservatives are obviously responding to that desire to
crack down on bail. Crack down on bail problems.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be popular, and I support that. And this led to the an interesting, inevitable perhaps, but we'll call it interesting for now, political response by the Liberals, which was, first of all, to get all precious about using the notwithstanding clause.
Can I also point out, it's not just bail reform, but also we're talking about using the notwithstanding clause to overturn previous Supreme Court sections that make, for example, life in prison for repeat murderers impossible.
General corrections-related issues,
Yeah, exactly.
So first, there was some pearl clutching and hand-wringing about using the notwithstanding clause itself. I find that unpersuasive. Like, it's in the Constitution. I'm not going to wring my hands about people using the Constitution constitutionally. I know others disagree with me on that one, but that's just where I come down on this one. Don't put shit in the Constitution you don't want used. That's one of my rules of life.
Look, and then the other question that brings to me is, like, is it appropriate or inappropriate for a legislator to put forward a set of laws that, for example, say that if you are a multiple mass murderer, you should be in prison for life? Or is it appropriate for the Supreme Court to overturn that and declare the idea of life imprisonment against a charter right? I mean,
we're democracy. The legislators reflect the will of the people.
That's right. Like, either you think that the Supreme Court should have ultimate say on something like that, or you think that the Democratic leader should have ultimate say on that. I don't have a problem with the Democratic leader making rulings of that nature, of saying, like, look, no, we actually think that if you've killed 20 people, there's nothing unconstitutional and there's no breach of charter rights to expect that you should spend your life in prison. I don't have a problem with that.
I like strong courts overseeing a supreme legislature. That's the only way democracy is going to work.
That's right. That's how the balance is good. And that's the sort of situation in which using the notwithstanding clause to overturn a bad Supreme Court decision is appropriate, and that's literally what it was put in the Constitution to do, or in the Charter to do.
Yep, quite
Moving
literally.
on.
Plus all the political shenanigans, but ultimately, the Liberals, after kind of doing some, and not just Liberals, there were other concerns, but certainly the Liberals.
And one more point, I'm just saying, a notwithstanding clause, I believe, has a 5-year time limit, so
it would have to be renewed.
It would have to be renewed. So if you disagree with the Conservatives' decision to invoke the notwithstanding clause to make, for example, mass murderers able to spend life in prison,
win an election,
and then you can cease to renew the notwithstanding clause.
Yep.
Like all of these decisions
are. Just wait.
That's right. Or you just wait. Like, so as I said, if you think that is going to be a popular thing to do, go for it. Well done.
Yep.
That's democracy for you, motherfuckers. Anyway.
Well, I just love the idea.
I don't mean to ramble, but.
No, I love the idea that the Liberals are like so convinced that like Pierre Poilievre will never dare undo, say, dental care, but don't want to grapple with the fact that they could find themselves in a situation where they're going to undo keeping really bad criminals in prison longer.
Yeah.
Like that sword cuts both ways. Anyway, just to get back to the timeline of this. So first there was the general hand-wringing about the use of the notwithstanding clause being like ungentlemanly or something. Well, fuck you. But then we got into, and inevitably, and I find this fascinating for two reasons. They started to talk about, will Pierre Poilievre use the notwithstanding clause to strip away people's protections against discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation, gender identity, religious affiliation, et cetera, et cetera.
Because this is like cookies. Once you invoke the notwithstanding clause for one thing, obviously you're going to do it for literally everything.
You'll just be spamming it everywhere.
Yeah.
Two very interesting political points to make to this. The first one, I'm going to make more seriously. The second one, I'm going to have a laugh at. Serious point, to my liberal friends, I don't think it's going to go the way you are hoping if you try to create a link in the minds of the voters between protecting gay rights and incarcerating pedophiles. I don't think that's a good move. And I'm warning you guys very seriously. First of all, I think it's bad on its own merits. But I also just think the average Canadian who has no problem with gay marriage, look at the polls. We have completely embraced this.
Mm-hmm.
You and I both included.
Mm-hmm.
If you try to tell a Canadian that the only way to protect gay marriage is to let the pedophiles out, or to have the guy who has already repeatedly shot up his community get bail after shooting it up again, and if your argument for not putting that guy behind bars is it will derail gay marriage, you will be laughed out of any room you're in when you make that argument.
And yet they are trying to make that exact argument when it comes to abortion.
That's point two. This is why I'm just going to have a laugh at this. If you want, so look, this is, we talked about this on a podcast a couple of weeks ago where you and I both said after the budget, we were going to be responsible, prudent commentators and journalists. We were going to wait 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Peace sign. 2 weeks. We were going to wait to see if there was any polling movement. There wasn't. And if anything, the Conservatives have, based on the aggregators, slightly improved. So that whole parade of announcements before the budget produced no gains for the Liberals. The budget itself produced no gains for the Liberals. And I'm not even convinced what they thought was the keystone of that, which is the capital gains tax measure. I don't think that's working for them.
Okay, but first I think we need to lay out exactly what the argument that they're making here is.
We'll get to it now. That's
okay.
The exact point I'm at.
Yeah.
Having failed on all of those points, they are now jumping on a petition that one no-name Conservative MP had about abortion rights, and they're saying he will use the notwithstanding clause to remove your right to an abortion.
Okay, so let's
18 months before the election, they're already hitting the big A button.
Yeah, they're hitting the big red button. Okay,
they're doomed.
Doomed. Okay, so let's break this down for a minute here. Just a minute, I'm going to cough. All right, let's break this down for a minute here.
Bless you.
Because this is the argument. The argument is because Pierre Poilievre has said we're going to use or potentially use the notwithstanding clause to restore some fairly sensible law and order measures. Therefore, the Conservative parties are going to be throwing the notwithstanding clause at absolutely everything. Like crazy
Once
people.
Once you break the seal, you'll just be notwithstanding everything.
It's like a Pandora's box kind of thing.
Yeah.
And from that logic, the assumption is, okay, we all know that these guys secretly hate abortion and they're all part of a secret agenda to ban abortion. So they're going to invoke the notwithstanding clause in order to ban abortion. Couple problems. Well, firstly, there is no law in Canada on abortion. That is it's a legal vacuum. The only people who actually govern abortion access at this point is the Canadian Medical Association in terms of their standards of rights and ethics that are directed toward doctors.
People don't understand the history of what happened is the Supreme Court killed our abortion law and the Parliament panicked and never replaced it.
Well,
so
they tried to replace it, but essentially it turned into every attempt that the Parliament made since Morgan Taylor has effectively gone off the rails because it's such a political third rail. Nobody wants to actually regulate it. So the question of abortion access in Canada is an absolute, it's a vacuum. It's a legal non-entity and has been for now generations. And as a result, the Canadian Medical Association essentially filled that vacuum with their own rules and guidelines. With their own regulations. Which, I mean, most Canadians are fine with that. That seems to be okay. And in fact, if anything, Canadians actually in some respects have poorer abortion access than some more liberal United States because of the guidelines and restrictions that the Canadian Medical Association has put in place.
Yeah, as always, or Europe.
Yeah, so and also, by the way, you as a member, a citizen in a democracy have no say over what the CMA does because we as citizens can't vote in or out the CMA. Like they're a professional organization. So that's kind of where we've delegated power to. So in order for the Conservatives to invoke the notwithstanding clause on abortion, the first thing they would need to do is pass legislation on abortion that the Supreme Court would then need to decide is unconstitutional or against charter rights, that they would then need to invoke the notwithstanding clause on.
I think you could legislate the notwithstanding clause into it from the outset.
Yes, that's right. And I think we've seen that in Saskatchewan with a lot of the
where you just stick it right in there.
You could stick it right in there, and just in case, boom. So okay, but that really doesn't have anything to do with the notwithstanding clause. Basically, you're just saying they're going to legislate abortion. Okay. And what's your proof for that? Well, because as you mentioned, some no-name MP whom you and I have already forgotten the name of passed or put forward a petition on abortion issues. I think that petition had something like 47
Imagine
signatures.
he's a regular listener.
Yeah. Oh God, I'm sorry. I feel bad. No, but whatever. But I mean, like, look, this petition. All MPs can put forward kind of private members' petitions. So somebody in their jurisdiction or their constituency says, I'm putting forward a petition to the Parliament of Canada to change the color of stop signs. Anybody can put forward a petition like that. The petition can be read out in the House of Commons.
I would sign that.
This is literally just a thing that all MPs can do. I think this abortion petition, I didn't even read it, but my understanding is that it had like something like 47 signatures. Thank you, sir, for coming, and please sit down. Like that, there's no momentum here. Are there some conservative members who have really strong opinions on abortion access? Yeah, absolutely. No question. There are some pro-life MPs out there. No dispute. Are there some factions within the Conservative Party who would love to see the Conservative Party embrace some kind of legislation on abortion? Yes, absolutely. That's a thing. Do I think that a Conservative Party under Pierre Poilievre is going to go within 300 miles of this? No. Why? Firstly, because abortion access is wildly popular in Canada, and the sort of people who want to restrict abortion access remain on the political fringe. So if the pro-lifers want to change that they need to change the culture before they can hope to affect any kind of political change on that front. And secondly, if you look at any history post-Morgan Taylor of trying to bring in abortion legislation, it's a clusterfuck that completely derails the entire agenda. It goes, firstly, it's gone nowhere every time it's been tried. The parties that have tried to impose any kind of even fairly liberal restrictions on this have wound up spending radical loads of political capital on it, and it's wound up getting nowhere. So, like, just the political math on this doesn't add up. The idea that you would be
bad math.
You'd be risking 6 months to a year's worth of political attention and capital in order to appease even, frankly, a fairly tiny section of your own conservative base doesn't add up. Doesn't make sense. And also, you've had the Conservative Party has now come right out and said, we have no desire to legislate on this issue. We don't think this is passed. Now, sure, could they be lying? Yeah, sure. I mean, all politicians can lie, and they could. I think that if all of a sudden you were to see a major cultural shift where all of a sudden 60 to 70% of Canadians were clamoring for some kind of abortion legislation, yes, I think a Conservative Party would probably follow in that lead. But I can't see how it makes any kind of political sense for any party, Liberal, NDP, or Conservative, to be bringing in any kind of abortion legislation at all when the vast majority of the populace has no appetite for it. There's no here. There's nowhere to go here.
You know what? I agree every word of that, but to me, my objection is just much more fundamental. We're 18 months out, and they're already hitting the big A button.
Well, yes, that's right. This is the sort of thing the Liberals will pull out in the last 2 weeks of an election campaign that they think isn't going well.
And they're 18 months out.
And they're 18 months. I haven't even done the math on that. Maybe even longer.
We at the Line, me in particular, but some of our other contributors as well, more than one of us noted with interest when the Liberals took the big swing on guns about a year ago and it failed. Didn't go anywhere. And the old saying, right? Like too many trips to the well. They threw that bucket down the well. Instead of hearing a splash, they heard it hit the stones at the bottom. There was no more water for them. And just a couple of weeks ago, they were talking about rounding up more guns and getting that buyback program underway. They're so convinced guns are a public safety threat. They spent 4 years not confiscating the guns they've already banned. Deliverology at its finest. So they're talking about it, and they're talking about abortion. And I was talking with a friend of mine in Ottawa who is a Liberal, and I just said, it's not going to work. And they said to me, I know. They just said, we're playing the hits. Like,
I know, but it's also it's interesting because every time you hit that button, it loses a little bit of its potency and its effectiveness, right? I mean, that's what we've learned from the gun situation. You're right.
Played out. They tapped it out.
They've tapped it out. I just don't think that is and also I just don't think it's a realistic concern. I mean, my issues with Pierre Poilievre are not that he's going to legislate abortion. My issues with Pierre Poilievre is that he and the people around him are
trolls.
Yeah, who are going to throw shit out there that is more about getting their angers and their feels out than actually governing people in a meaningful way, or
They need to be
reforming
more
the
like
system.
me. I keep all my anger and feels
It
deep
feels inside.
inside.
Or reforming the institutions and the departments that so radically do need reform in this
but that's
country.
hard. Why not just do things that will make
Why not just do things that make the right
angry?
people on Twitter angry? I mean, that's my concern about them. It's not that I think that Pierre Poilievre is secretly harboring a desire to, control the wounds of the nation. I just don't see it.
Guns aren't working anymore. The budget didn't work. I don't think abortion's going to work. What do they have left?
What's left?
Yeah. And again, this is really
their economic
early.
record. Canada's.
Well, I mean, you saw the bank. I know this is off topic, but I mean, just to that point, the Bank of Canada this week had that statement, which I think was meant to be reassuring, where they're like, the majority of Canadians will be able to survive rolling over their mortgages at a higher rate. And I think this is something you and your husband were talking about recently. You had to renew the mortgage, and
actually, it went up. We took a 3-year mortgage, and I think we were up. We're $800 a month poorer now as a result.
In
like
places
and subscribe,
like
Toronto, please
like
pay
and subscribe.
Please pay my line subscription.
Like Toronto and Vancouver, Jen, it's going to be a lot more than $800 a month.
Yeah, I'm in Calgary.
And when I see the Bank of Canada saying Canadians can survive this, okay.
I mean, we're not gonna head into famine. Sure.
No, I'll trust their math, but they're going to survive it by no longer going out for dinner, by pulling the kids out of summer camps, by not taking that trip to the islands they were hoping for this week, by not staining the deck this year. And I'm not criticizing the bank. Like, their job is not to calculate social and political impact. It's to look at the economics, and I get that. And I think they're right. But I also think, like, you're the Liberals here, no one's listening to you anymore on guns. I don't think people are going to listen to them on abortion. The budget didn't work. Dental care, no dentists are signing up. Child care isn't indexed to inflation, and there's not enough spots. You've got millions of Canadians rolling over their mortgages between now and the next election.
But hey, guess what? Now your birth control pills and diabetes medication might be partially covered. I mean, let's just hope that your current plans don't drop them so that the government can cover them for you. I mean,
let's also hope that like thanks to the free birth control pills, but like I run a small business and my capital gain structure just changed. Like I just don't know. And I say this with despair, which explains all the heavy sighs. It's going to get so fucking stupid between now and the next election.
It's already gotten stupid, Matt.
But it's going to get stupider. Stupider is always possible.
I keep on coming back to the idea that, like, are they really under the illusion that they can keep this going for another year? Because we're already in stupid season, and this isn't going to get better.
I have traditionally been a believer that Justin Trudeau is going to stay and fight this election.
I know, but this government needs to be taken out like a lame horse behind the shed and shot.
Metaphorically speaking.
Yes.
I agree. And I've traditionally thought that Justin Trudeau is going to stay and fight the next election. And I know I might be increasingly unpopular in this. I still think he's their best shot. I think if anyone can save the furniture, it's him. I think anyone who would replace him is a real risk for the Liberals. But I don't know what they're going to do for the next year and a half. And it's going to get so fucking stupid. If they're already pounding the A button 18 months out, trying... The only thing standing between Pierre Poilievre and your gay marriage is releasing the psychos on bail. And then a big red L appears on the screen. Like, oh, fuck. Like, this is going to be bad.
But
I want to live in a country where gays can get married and violent criminals go to prison and stay there. That's the kind of country I want to live in.
Also, but think of the plus side on this, is that when we head into the next election and the Line brings back its weekly bullshit bulletin, it's going to be amazing.
It's going to be so sad.
It's going to be so great. On that note, don't miss that. Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
So, Matt, it looks like the social contagion of Gaza encampments continues to spread across the nation in North America. In Calgary, we got our own University of Calgary. But unlike other schools, something different happened when Calgary's Gaza encampment set itself up.
Everything you just said sounded like you were doing karaoke.
That was like
Sorry,
Gazing News
I was trying to
karaoke.
do like one of those old Pathé style newsreel voices. I was kind of experimenting with that, seeing if that
Oh,
worked for me.
sort of like the pre-movie World War II newsreels.
Yes, yeah,
The
those ones.
Allies storm ashore in
Correct.
Normandy. Yeah.
The Allies stormed ashore in
Yeah.
Normandy.
Okay. Constructive feedback.
Did I
You're
suck at
bad
that?
at that. Okay. But to actually answer the question, so we talked about this quite a lot on our last podcast. I went to the U of T one. I haven't been able to go back because, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I've been a bit under the weather a few days this week, and I actually spent the early part of the week in Ottawa. To all my Ottawa friends who are going to be annoyed I didn't drop them a line when I was there, sorry guys, I had a packed schedule. Like every minute was spoken for, so I wasn't able to socialize while I was there. But anyway, long story short, I have not been back to the U of T encampment. I'm going to try and get down there this weekend. But talking to friends of mine who were there, the encampment is about tripled in size.
Mm-hmm.
My advice to U of T a week ago was just get rid of that. Like, you don't have to, like, if people are like, oh, do you want heads cracked? Why is the only way to disperse an encampment by a university assumed to be like a cavalry charge? Like, if you move fast enough, if you move in the first day, send in bylaw officers and just take down the tents.
Dude, all you do is basically that there's already a fence around these situations, so go in and
but
just
like I said in the
them.
podcast, you and I could have taken that thing down with a hammer.
I know, I'm saying that if you were to actually properly staff it, you basically create a kettle and you let people out, but you don't let anything in.
My cheeky, God bless you. My cheeky suggestion was to build a much bigger fence around their fence. And then just like put like drapes around it so no one can see in, and then just
look. Actually, dispersing these encampments and dispersing them peacefully is not the problem here. Is the point we're trying to make here?
Fast enough.
Yeah.
Like once these things become physically, but I think more importantly psychologically entrenched, you're in a different situation. Anyway, U of T didn't. They issued an ultimatum. They didn't act on it, and now they've got an encampment that's triple the size, and wouldn't you know it, is becoming more radical. So there's been more weirdness at the U of T this week than last week. Anyway, this is all just prologue. I wake up this morning to the news, time zones working against us, but I woke up this morning to the news that last night, Thursday night, when we're recording this on Friday afternoon, my time, morning, your time, that overnight an encampment was set up at the University of Calgary. And you know what else happened overnight at the University of Calgary? The cops dismantled it.
They just moved in within like 24 hours. Was like, not having that today, friends.
I don't think it took that long. I'll check some of the local coverage and we can drop a few news links into the written dispatch.
Just so they're clear, this encampment had been dismantled before I even had the chance to figure out about it. Before I had even had it was gone before I discovered that it was a thing that I could go visit and report on.
A few arrests were made, but no real injuries. Like the riot police moved in, like they surrounded it, ordered most people to dismantle and disperse. Most people did. The ones that didn't, cops moved in a wave and arrested a bunch of people, wrote some tickets, and the encampment was gone. That's how you do that. And again, people will be like, "Oh, but what about the right to protest?" If every one of these kids wants to do nothing but march up and down the streets in front of the university, I got no problem with that. But occupying a space is a different thing. And taking over space, and I know other people are more sanguine about this than I'm not. I don't care what the cause is. I have a pretty proven track record on this. Don't occupy public spaces. Anyway, so purely as an object lesson, I woke up this morning to some of my Albertan and Calgary friends going, "Hey, Toronto, here's how it's done." So yeah, I will indulge my Calgary friends a bit of a victory dance on my head on this one. You know what, Jen, to your point, like the fact that it was gone before you even knew about it, during the trucker convoy back in 2022, 2 years ago, when some guys had the idea to do the same thing that they were doing in Ottawa in front of the Ontario legislature, the Toronto cops were ready. They never allowed those guys to get entrenched, again, psychologically as much as anything else. A fast reaction avoids a heavier reaction later.
So that's an interesting lesson. The other thing I would say is Calgary had a bit of an advantage because, of course, it wasn't the first encampment, or it wasn't one. It was a late comer to this particular conversation. So
Toronto is no excuse, though.
No, but I mean, you know that people in school had the conversation of what are we going to do if we get an encampment. The decision was made before the encampment was set up, and therefore they were able to move quickly and they had a bit of a late mover advantage to that extent. So I'm willing to give them some credit for that. However, what I do think is very interesting is that we're now going to be seeing these kinds of parallel situations playing out across different jurisdictions. You know, McGill in Montreal and in Quebec, U of T in Ontario, and now we've seen how Albertan schools are handling it. And so we're going to have an opportunity to look at firsthand at what tactics work and what tactics don't. And we're going to be able to see, okay, are there going to be consequences for clearing out the U of C encampment as quickly as it was cleared out? Or does that just turn out to be the best answer? And we're going to be able to take those lessons and move forward with those lessons in the future. It might very well be that the lesson we learn from these series of encampments is essentially once the encampment sets up, move quick, move rapidly, and clear it out as soon as possible, because that's going to be how you get the least disruptive outcome, the most peaceful outcome, and the one that doesn't wind up cracking heads or worse, encampments becoming entrenched and attracting really criminal elements and people getting hurt in them, which is again what we saw in Occupy Calgary, the Occupy protests when we talked about it last week. So as I said, I'm very open to I'm a little bit more sanguine to a lot of this stuff because look, this is one of the joys of Confederation, is that different jurisdictions can try different approaches to different problems and we can see what works. Great, super. I don't necessarily need to advocate for one outcome or one approach over the other, because I think that we have this opportunity to try different policy approaches in a real life laboratory that is the nation, right? So we're going to see how that happens and how that rolls out.
I guess in a week we can check back, but I'm a big believer in move fast and always have been, and it's been very frustrating for me as a Canadian these last few years to see almost every level of Canadian government adopt the move slow approach to everything. If move at all, like why move if you can avoid it? But if you must move very incrementally and slowly. Look, I get it. Like first of all, I'm with you on laboratories of democracy, totally there all the way 100%. I also in general have a philosophical attraction to the idea of a gradual incremental approach. Mm-hmm. But I also think just because a bureaucrat has never faced this problem before does not mean it is novel to the human experience. We ought to be able to draw lessons, not even from like the far past, but from like the fairly recent past.
Like 20 months ago?
Thereabouts. And, you know, it was on another podcast a few months ago in a related but different context where I made an emotional, full-throated appeal to the people of Canada, and I'm going to repeat it verbatim right now, okay? You ready? Mm-hmm. Read a fucking history book. Like, as I said last time, pretty much any of them. There's a lot of them out there. Go to your local bookstore. The history section is quite big. But if you pick one of them off the shelf at random, you've got a decent chance of learning something that will be usefully applicable to your life today. I am begging people to read a fucking history book.
Is there anyone in particular that you would recommend in the context of how to manage encampments and crowd control?
The Public Order Emergency Commission.
Ah, very good. Very good.
Not exactly not a history book.
It's not going to be something you get on chapters, but, you know, it's freely available. So there you go.
There you go. You can download it online.
Download it. Yeah, online.
It's a real page turner.
Matt, speaking of full-throated emotional appeals, I do think that there is something that we would like to note on this podcast, and that is the passing of Mr. Rex Murphy, who is a well-noted and in many quarters much beloved and or reviled.
Yeah, Rex was a National Post columnist while I was the comment editor, and after he was, he was a columnist longer than I was editor. He was a columnist before I was the editor, and he was a columnist after I was the editor of the National Post comment section.
How are you feeling today about this?
You know, a mix of thoughtful and sad. I mean, sad obviously because as controversial and provocative as he could be in writing and in broadcasts, as a man, he was quiet, shy, even understated, bit of a wallflower in a weird way. And people might be surprised to hear that, knowing how bombastic he could be in writing or in his spoken broadcasts, but he was a very quiet, shy man. very interested in the lives of others, but not in a bad way. Every time we had lunch, he just wanted to know how my kids were doing, and I was always surprised how much he already knew. Like, he clearly had been reading what I'd been writing, or listening to what I'd been saying, or observing my tweets, and he'd ask me how my son's hockey was going or how my daughter's piano was going. So he's a thoughtful man. So I'm sad on that front, but and I wish I had better Rex Murphy anecdotes. Like, he was a lunch companion. Like, that's like, we didn't have any fun adventures together. We just had nice conversations, and he'd always pick the restaurant. And he never picked a bad one. He liked to get out and for a little fine dining in Toronto, and I liked to sit across the table from him and just exchange war stories. But I'm feeling thoughtful today too, though, because the last couple of years, we've seen Christy Blatchford pass away. We've seen George Jonas, who I was close with personally. He's passed away. Now Rex. And I'm just thinking, every so often we hear of another member of that very different era of Canadian journalism here. And I'm not here to put any of these people on pedestals as people, because I'm going to leave it to the viewers and listeners of this podcast to decide for themselves what they thought of them. But what is happening, and this is kind of what I've been thoughtful about, is a generational changing of the guard. And you and I will quip sometimes that we used to be young, but now we're the old ones. I feel it in a different way on a day like this, because when I met Rex, I was a kid and he was 40-year veteran, and I got, Rex was almost 40 years older than me. So I've got a ways to go, but there is a generational change happening, and it's a very different media environment than for you and I, than the one that he was part of. And I was saying to someone recently, a contemporary of Rex, that generation of journalists, that we're losing a lot. Patterns of thinking, professional experience, ethical frameworks of how to do the job. Like, that's a very, like, it's you and I talk about this a lot. You and I are journalists, but we're also entrepreneurs now, and we're going to have to make business decisions that traditionally you would have had a publisher in an office on a totally different floor of the building. They would have been making that decision. That's gone now. So you and I are going to have to be nimble and creative and thoughtful on this in a way that guys in Rex eras did not. But there's also what I feel, and this is kind of why I feel thoughtful about this, is I've often thought in the last couple of years over COVID and wars abroad, what would Blatch have thought? What would George Jonas have thought? And up until earlier this week, he filed his last column this week. We knew what Rex thought, but we're losing that. And you and I are still young enough, despite all our jokes about lower back pain and whatnot, like, we're still young enough that there are still seniors among us in our industry, people who we can look to as repositories of wisdom and experience and information. But it's not going to be that long until it's us. And I wonder, just given the economics of the industry, is there going to be anyone behind us to ask? And I'd go out for lunch with Rex, and Rex liked to talk. For a shy guy and a wallflower, which he was, the guy knew how to tell a story. And I would just sit there and absorb and laugh because his stories were funny. In 30 or 40 years, will there be a younger generation of journalists who will find any value in the stories you or I might tell over lunch?
Oh, probably not. I'm fine with that. I don't know.
As a guy who is, despite my public work, an introvert, I'm okay missing some lunches. But I sometimes think one of the things
this goes beyond just you and I. This goes beyond to a
100%.
way of,
it's our generation.
But it goes out to sort of a concept of journalism and a concept of this profession that radically transcends us, but which we are inheritors of and inheritors to. And
do we have anyone to pass it down to?
Do we have anyone to pass it on to? Right?
Yeah. something that is worth mentioning, and I mention this from time to time. And Rex, if you can hear me, buddy, I'm not trying to talk about anything but you, I promise. But this is where my mind went, and it went the same place after Blatch died, and after George died too. There used to be newsrooms of hundreds.
Yeah.
And you and I were in the era of newsrooms of dozens.
Mm-hmm.
The Line is the two of us, plus some of our friends. And where does it go from here? Do we have a cycle of rebuilding and regrowth? And this is the optimistic take. Do people like you and I and colleagues of ours, from whatever ideological position they hold, but there is a plethora of independent media outlets in this country covering specific beats or representing specific ideologies. Do we collectively succeed in keeping the spirit of the old system alive so that it's in place for when better economic times and progress allows probably not a carbon copy of the old, but something more stable than this to emerge?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we the dead cat bounce?
Well, dead cat bounce would suggest that we're bouncing. We're not. We're still...
We've bounced a little, like and subscribe, but...
I don't even think dead cat bounce would be the way to describe it. It would just be the end of a lineage. That's all.
The
Let it be
last
kind of an
gasp.
intellectual lineage.
Are we the Emperor's last soldiers on some little Pacific island?
Yeah.
Refusing to surrender to the appeal of going to work as a lobbyist or a carpenter? I don't know. And, look, Rex has friends and family who are going to miss him, and to them specifically, I say, obviously, I'm thinking of you all. I'm sorry for your loss, and I know that there are millions of Canadians out there who will feel the same. But you asked kind of how I was feeling today, and this is what I'm feeling. And the good news is, you and I have time. Like, we've got some runway left, God willing. Touch wood, et cetera, et cetera. Every day is a gift, but. Rex was 77. I'm 41. Okay, so there's 36 years between me today and to his final day. But I just think, I was joking the other day with a friend about, I was at a conference recently, and I can't say much about the conference. It was all Chatham House rules, but it was a conference on the future of media. And my wife, who knows how to get a shot in, she said to me, "Oh, media has a future?" I was like, that one hurt. One of the things we talked about at the conference was this cycle of contraction and regrowth and rebirth. And I generally speaking, agree with that. In general terms, a lot of things are cyclical. But there's two problems with that. One, if it's a 25-year cycle of decline and those 25 years overlap precisely with my prime earning years, civilization may be fine, but I've got a problem. So that's the one thing. But the other thing I've thought about, and this is what I was saying to my friend, every era thinks they're living in a unique moment in history, and I guess technically they are. But when I look at these things like artificial intelligence, I look at social media, I look at the rise of misinfo and disinfo, you and I are no longer facing economic problems. We are. But on top of that, we're facing political problems, we're facing social problems, we're facing technological problems. And I wonder, would people miss us if we're gone? And this is getting a little existential, so I'm sorry if I'm bumming everybody out at the end of the podcast. But remember, I wrote a column a few months ago where I talked about how Facebook was better now that news was gone. The news vanished off Canadian Facebook because of C-18, that federal legislation. And for me, it was replaced with like hockey memes and Star Trek clips. My Facebook experience, way better. But take that and extrapolate that out. Would everyone's lives be better if we went away? Probably not. But would they miss us? I don't know. So...
You're gonna miss us when we're gone. Yeah, so I don't get too existential about this sort of stuff because one thing that bothers me a lot
either. But
no, do you know something that actually kind of bothers me a little bit is then when people sort of talk about us or hate on us or whatever, there seems to be this underlying assumption that like it's kind of our duty to save Canadian media. You know what I mean? Like you kind of get this undertone. It's like, well, why aren't you spending all the money that you make on reporting? It's like, we don't make that much money, guys. Like we make basically enough to pay ourselves, and that's about it. But there seems to be like a lot of people looking at us as being like a potential future model and a potential future model. And don't you see like it's there seems to be a sense that it's our duty to save things or to fix this. That's an underlying a lot of the critiques of us and who and what we do, and also the positive side of who and what we do, or what we are and what we do. And I think I have to try and put people's expectations a little bit in check. It's like the Line's not going to save Canadian journalism. I'm just going to be a second. I'm just going to yell at my son for a second.
While you're yelling at your kid, what I'll tell you is that, again, the conference I was at just a few days ago was the future of Canadian media, the future of the news in Canada, and it's Chatham House rules, so I'm not allowed to identify who was there or participants or what they said, but I feel comfortable revealing something I said, and I have no problem putting this on the record. It's exactly what you were just saying. I feel no personal sense of responsibility to save an industry. I feel a sense
we don't have that power.
No, but even if we did, I don't feel that responsibility.
Well,
my sense of responsibility is to feed my kids.
Yeah, and also, but in that lies the future. You know what I mean? Like as I said, we at the Line can't save Canadian media. That's
but
beyond
if 100
our power.
lines succeed, we will have saved it accidentally.
Well, but no, but that's the point. Like, yeah, but we can create a life raft for us and hopefully a couple of other journalists that will be able to contribute to keeping a kind of light alive, to keeping a kind of approach to reporting and seeing the world, and approach to reporting on the world alive. And it's like we're kind of trying to keep a little ember in grasp. Our duty ultimately is to try and save ourselves. Yeah. And to, in the process of saving ourselves, keep the training and the legacy that we are inheriting alive for the next person who can take that light and do something else with it. Even if that means that, you know, maybe it's a generation, maybe it's 2 generations, maybe it's 3 generations from now before that light can lead to the next big explosion of things. I think that's our duty. It's just to be lights in the darkness and just do the best that we can as lights in the darkness. That's what we're known for.
We are lights in the darkness.
Lights in the darkness, shiny little lights in the darkness. But no, I mean, I think that if you're looking at the Line and seeing a model for the saving of an industry, that's not a realistic ask of us. That's not a realistic goal. I do think that we can grow bigger than we are, and I do think that, you know, like and subscribe, we can grow and expand beyond what we're currently doing and continue to do that. But for me, you know, it's enough. It's enough to just survive and to try and pass the baton along, you know, and that's kind of in the big picture sense the legacy that I think that you and I might have if we're lucky and if we're smart and if we do things right.
And if people like and subscribe.
But yes, but you know, 100 people like us do something similar and you have an industry.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I didn't even tell you what my remarks were at the conference, but that's almost it verbatim. Like, people have to understand what my motives are. And my motives obviously are aligned with you. So I speak for us both on this one, but I'm not here to save an industry. I'm not here to save a profession. I'm here to feed my kids with the talents that I have and in a field that interests me. And you're along for the ride. We're joined at the hip on this merry adventure, and we're doing okay. And we'd like to do better. And so, again, like and subscribe, but we're doing okay. And rather than viewing myself or you as saviors of an industry, I view us as parents to our respective children who, if you and I get up every day and we do an okay job doing what we do, my kids eat next month. Yeah. And if a few hundred people like us in the country make the same kind of decisions and enjoy the same level of success, we will still have an industry. It just won't look anything like the one that Rex Murphy came up in, with that small radio station and a little outpost rock on Newfoundland, right? And then ended up being one of the national voices of the CBC. And then, you know, finished his career right down to almost his dying breath, writing in the pages of a national newspaper. That kind of trajectory is dead. That kind of career arc is gone, at least for a generation. And so again, I've been very cynical, maybe in a way, of saying kind of you and I, we're not here for an industry. We're here for ourselves and for our families.
Well, but
If it,
in
if it,
serving ourselves, we are serving the industry. That's the thing I'm trying
yeah,
to marry for people. It's like in the pursuit of our own self-interest, we are pursuing something greater than ourselves as well. And that's an honor and an ability to do. But
I just hope there's someone left to inherit it.
I just hope there's someone, I hope there's someone left to pass the baton on to and
Yeah.
inherit it, one. And two, the thing I just think that people need to be realistic about is like, no, if you think the Line is going to be the next,
Global News investigative team or W5.
like that's the economic model isn't there for us there. It
Well,
just,
if CTV can't afford W5, I can't either.
well, that's right. And also it's putting so much of there's a weird sense of, okay, these are the plucky young, whatever independents, they're going to figure it out. And it's absolving all of these legacy media organizations like CTV and Bell and all these sorts of things of their duty to also do the same thing, to, in the pursuit of their own self-interest, keep a little of a light alive for the next generation. There seems to be almost a weird, like, greater expectation on the two of us, which is like two people in a trench coat and a Substack to save the industry. Like, and meanwhile, there are corporations making billions of dollars out there, in part because they have privileged access to a Canadian oligopoly who are absolutely failing in their most basic and contractually obligated duties to preserve journalism as a craft and an art form. And that's the paradox that I kind of struggle with. It's a bit odd to me, but that's just me.
Well, you know what we are. And this is going to be a statement of the obvious for most people. It's going to outrage other people. We're capitalists.
There is no ethical consumption under capitalism. There's like I said, all we can do is align our self-interest with the interest of something greater than ourselves and hope for the best.
You and I aligned our personal self-interest in a way that has been mutually reinforcing and rewarding. If it ends up helping the industry along the way, I will be genuinely pleased, but that's not what I did it for. And people should understand that. And I don't mean that in a sense of fuck y'all, although I guess some people will receive it that way. I just mean it cannot be up to us to save the industry. And if you want Jen and I to save the industry and you're not a paying subscriber and donor to the Line, I don't know what to tell you. And I'm saying that partially as a sales pitch, obviously. Read theline.ca, people. Sign up for a paid account today. But I also say this to people all the time because I get emails going, I was hoping for a little bit more original reporting. And I scroll through our subscriber list and I find that person's a free reader.
Yeah. Like, believe me, I want to invest more money in original reporting. I want to invest more money in original reporting too. I agree with you, but we need income to make that happen.
Pony up, cheapskate.
Yeah, that's the best sales pitch we have to date. Anyway, pony up, cheapskate. Anyway, I think that's all we have to say about this. But condolences to Rex Murphy and his family. Yeah. And
and I know I went off on a tangent there, Jen, but this is guys of Rex's era. They were the last ones to have that magic in a bottle 20th century confluence of advertising dollars and a free press.
Yeah.
And Rex lasted just long enough to see kind of the end of it, but he was largely, not completely, but largely isolated from the consequences. Generationally speaking, you and I get the shit end of the stick. We are the generation of consequences. The only question for me is the next generation going to build off whatever we manage to save, or do they just turn off the lights? So,
yeah, essentially, Rex, we're the can the furniture be saved generation. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what are we, Jen? Go right back to the mission statement. We're holding the line.
Yeah,
we're not going to advance the line, but we might be able to hold it. That's why we call the fucking thing the Line.
Yes.
So anyway, to Rex's family, I know I went off on my own little tangent there, but that's where my mind went because, and it honestly, I mean it as a compliment. It's a testament to his career. I just honestly wonder, will there be anyone left to have another one like that? So to all of Rex's close friends and family, and also, Jen, if I can, to my former colleagues at the National Post who'd spent the last 3 years working closely with him when I hadn't been. We'd exchanged a few polite emails, but that's about it. But I'm sorry to everybody. He was a big character. He really filled the room, and he will be missed.
On that note, thanks for joining us on this extended version of the Line podcast. We really appreciate you guys sticking with us. And please do leave us your comments and send us notes and check out the written dispatch if you haven't.
and send us money,
Give us
but
a little
also like feedback and compliments.
feedback and comments. Anyway, thanks again.
Take care.